Conversations podcast. This podcast is all about equipping, encouraging, and inspiring youth pastors weekly with topics that are brought to the table by youth pastors from all over the world. And now, here's your host for this week, Melissa Stevenson.
Welcome to Student Ministry Conversations. I'm Melissa, your host today, and we're really glad that you joined us. We hope that anything that you learned today or on any of our other podcasts equips you to be a better youth leader wherever you are serving. Please check out our website, studentministryconversations.com. Oh, I think that's .org. I haven't done this in a bit, but I think it's .org. But check that out. Find either one of them. You'll find it because you're all smart people. And check out that for more podcasts, for blog articles, and a way to contact us. If you feel like you have something to share, let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation. So today I have my friend Ian, and we have known each other for just a minute. We were in the same youth group in Oklahoma, and I did the math because your sister and I met in preschool 40 years ago. So
40 years ago.
40 years ago, which just sounds awful. But we met when we were 3. So we did youth together, and so we're here talking today about what can youth groups do, and what do you think the responsibilities are for youth groups during a natural disaster. So we're both from Oklahoma. We just had some tornadoes up there. And your kid actually came and helped me clean up my sister's house, which I was very helpful for.
Yep.
They're very thankful because he could reach things I could not. All the things out of high cabinets for me. But we both grown up doing tornado relief, and so I want to kind of get your opinion today. So, will you give me your spiel? How did you get to be where you are? What do you do? And just who are you?
Sure. So I am the associate campus pastor at Life.Church in Shawnee, and I lead all of our life groups, and which is our small groups ministry, and all of our life missions, our missions outreach. We are a local mission church, which means that we focus primarily on doing mission work within the community in which we exist. We do see a need for global missions, and we do work through Life.Church as an organization to do global missions around the world. But the unique things that all of our global mission partners do is they actually work through local churches all around the world as well. So we do believe that the local church is the hope of the community. And so for me, one of the reasons that I got here is you reminded me this morning when we were talking a little bit about being in high school, and we were, in the same youth group together. And when I was a junior in high school is when the Oklahoma City Murrah bombing happened, and I felt such a calling, an urge, a burden to go and do something that I immediately called my mom, who was a nurse, and she and I both drove downtown, and we looked for ways for me to get involved and ways for her to get involved. One of the places that I found to get involved was with Feed the Children, and what Feed the Children was doing was they were actually packing semis full of supplies to send down to the workers downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And so I spent actually the next week going every morning, just like it was a job, down to the Feed the Children building, packed up supplies, palleted them, shrink wrapped them, and then sent them in those semi-loads down there. In fact, I spent so many days in a row down there that by the last few days, they actually had me leading groups of volunteer teams coming in. And so that was kind of like the start of like my drive to really show up for people in crisis. And that transitioned into a teaching career where I taught. I was also a high school principal. There was a number of different crisis situations that I would have to deal with, and realized I was just really good in those kinds of situations.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually that just led me towards getting involved at Life.Church and eventually coming on staff here, and then that's the role that I get to play.
Well, and I love that that's your role now, because when I bring my youth group up to Oklahoma, we've done this, twice now, for missions, I call you and say, hey, I have kids, what can we go do? And you have all the connections
Sure.
and the knowledge of there, especially since Shawnee's had tornadoes a lot lately that our little area has. And so I love that you have those connections, because then you can share it with other groups coming in so we can all do good. So I love that.
Right.
So
Right.
our youth group, we didn't necessarily do much in the tornado relief or disaster relief. In fact, our mission trips, we went skiing, like, but we didn't, our youth group, we didn't really go and do mission work that we probably both of us have taken groups on now. So
Right.
it was almost like I had to learn as an adult. But what do you think that the role that church youth groups can play in their communities when something happens like that?
Yeah, so I think they can play a really important role. If I think back to the things that we did, we did the UNICEF drive where we
We
would
did do
walk around
that.
and ask people to change those boxes.
Hmm.
And we might do some like little one-off things here and there, but we didn't do a whole lot. We did my senior year, I believe, take a missions trip to Russia, where we went on a long-term mission trip.
You did do
But I
that
will
because of
tell you, just
Alex.
from that yeah, I do. But for me, if I look back on that and just kind of taking hindsight, there was some important things that came out of that, but some of it was missional tourism. Like we went, we saw, like experienced a lot of things. Um, but I think there's some things that we could have brought and done differently, and maybe there's some ways that we could have really impacted a local church. Of course, local churches were new at that time, so. Um, but I do believe, as I'm sorry, do you want to say something?
Well, I was going to say, but I also think that part of that could have been the 90s, but it also could have been the size of our church and the size of our community, that we just didn't have the
Yeah.
resources to go and do. And I didn't get to go on that trip because I was too young. But um, but you're right. There are definitely things that they are. I think that now we see youth as being more capable, like that they
Yeah.
have things that they can do. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think we talk a lot here at our church about the youth being the church of today.
Hmm.
They like our youth. So that's not my current role right at my church. I'm not the youth pastor. Part of that's because I have no hair, I think. But one of the things, as we do say, that our church, our youth are the church of today. They are passionate. They are idealistic. They have values that
Hmm.
they want to live out, and then they have energy and they have excitement,
Yes.
and so those are things that, in channeled in the right directions, I think make a big difference. And there's a lot of research that shows out there that when our youth see themselves as the church and
Hmm.
not part of a church, that actually leads into long-term engagement in church attendance for them as they transition into adulthood. Those who serve and see themselves as a valuable part of the church are more likely to stay connected to a church body as they continue into adulthood. And so I think there's a
Absolutely.
lot of this. It's part of a discipleship journey,
Hmm.
but it's also like it's a part of who they are. They want to serve. They want to go out and make a difference and be a part of something that's bigger than themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I love you said about the energy because honestly, they have the energy. They also have the strength. They have not
Yeah.
broken their backs yet, right? Like
Sometimes the height, right,
the
Melissa?
height.
So
Yes. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, they also can lift things that I'm getting to the
Yeah.
point where that's not my strength anymore. Not that I'm a very big person in the first place, but they have the just to say the bodies, like they have the physical capabilities of doing
Hmm.
those things. And so that's the reason I really like when they can come and help because that it's that you have to make them know that they are capable, that they
Hmm.
have the ability to do that, that they don't have to just sit at home. Well, so we talked about that they can. Do you think that they have a responsibility that they should, that they are almost required to help in a situation?
Uh, that's a tricky question, but
Yes.
I think as Christ followers, we have an obligation to serve those who are hurting and marginalized,
Hmm.
right? And so when people are struggling as Christ followers, that is religion that Christ finds as pure, right? That's pure religion. Like, how do we go out and serve those who are in a situations that where they're struggling? And
Hmm.
so I do think whether it's youth, whether it's the aged, uh, we have a responsibility to serve and to love those around us who are going through crisis. So
Hmm.
yeah.
I would agree with that absolutely. That was one of the things I noticed last week when I was up there helping was that the tornado had created opportunities for people to serve. So I'm not saying that there's a vengeful God that was like, take out the neighborhood, but it was
Right.
there was opportunities now for churches to come into that neighborhood and say, "Hey, God loves you. Would you like a breakfast burrito?" Like that was
Hmm.
actually one of the best ones that came by. There was lots of brisket sandwiches and water, but the breakfast burrito, brilliant, so smart. And so I love that there was so many churches, but there was also so many people that had not been in that neighborhood, that didn't know these other people, that now were being all brought together by this situation.
Hmm.
So, what do you think are unique strengths that a youth group could bring to, or even just a church could bring to a disaster like that?
Well, I think some of it is just relationships. Like, so for instance, you think about the tornadoes that hit Hera, Choctaw area,
Hmm.
like one of the best things you can do is not try to manufacture random help. That's like, who do you have relationships with that need help?
Yes.
and and so those relationships I think are really key. Those are best opportunity for discipleship, but also evangelism, right? Like
Hmm.
if we know of somebody who is hurting and we can show up for them and show the love of Christ and be his hands and feet, then that's the best opportunity for people to see what it means to be a Christ follower
Yes.
and to experience the love of Jesus. And so I think those are some really important strengths. Kids are really connected in a lot of different ways, and so they, if they, and I think that there's a unique piece of that too, is that even if they're not regularly friends, like they spend a lot of time together at school,
Hmm.
if they know somebody that's even an acquaintance that's going through crisis, they want to show up for that person.
Yes. There's like
Like
that
I,
added
it,
thing.
all of a sudden it is a best friend,
Hmm.
right? And that's not because it's fake or anything like that, but they feel that need and desire to go and serve somebody. And I think that one of the worst things that we can do as adults is try to extinguish that with excuses.
Hmm.
And so, but how is, so my son was asking me over and over again, like, how can I get out of school and serve like you did at the murder bombing? I'm like, kind of wish I'd never told you that story, but at the same time, I'm really glad that you want to go serve people.
Right.
So yes, I have this relationship with Callie and Melissa. I see that there's some things going on,
Hmm.
and so let me send you somewhere where I know that you'll be directed well, that you'll be able to get involved, and then I can do what my job is as a missions pastor, to try to help direct and coordinate things.
Yes.
And so for him, that was a great opportunity to go and step into that. So I do think that there's some really unique things that our youth bring. And I think one of the most important ones is connections and that desire to want to show up.
Right, absolutely. I think there's also something to be said about there's definitely that willingness, but also one of the things I've discovered with this tornado, all the other ones I've done, we've done the outside work, right? The branches and clearing the streets and things like that. This was a whole new experience because it was my sister's house. The roof came off, the rain came in. So we had to empty the house so they can do the renovations and they can move. And so that is not something that we've done before, of packing up someone's house. And that's not something that you would want strangers to come in and help you do. Like, because
Yeah,
you could feel like they're going to judge me for how my house looks. I went didn't do the dishes before the tornado hit. Sorry, y'all. Like
you're
that was,
right.
4 days ago and I haven't
And
had
why didn't the
water.
tornado take those? Like if the
Exactly.
tornado would
That
just
would have
take the
been
dirty
helpful,
dishes.
right?
Yeah.
But so I don't want, strangers to judge my house, but I also don't want them to steal from me, and I don't want them to take advantage of me. All of those things could
Sure.
be going through their brains. But youth, there is that innocence about them that they will just come help. And
Yeah.
I do love that because frankly, they're all still learning how to clean things in general, and so their rooms are probably just as messy as their friends when they're trying to go clean. Um, Ellie, or the middle kid there, she's 12. Her friends came in over and helped her. And there was no like, oh, why didn't you clean your room? Because that's just they all live like that now. They just have messy rooms. So, but it's that innocence and that non-judgmental. I think that was really key. Um, and so that was really interesting to see that. Um,
Yeah, and,
oh, go
and I
ahead.
think it's a great opportunity. I think it's a great opportunity for also for kids that to show up and do things that maybe they don't do at home, right? Like they,
That is
like my
true.
kid serves and washes dishes all weekend at the church with our
Yes.
hospitality team, but he won't do that at home without crying and moaning about things. And so uh, But I think that there's a willingness to
Uh-huh.
show up and do those kinds of things in those moments of crisis and to serve others. It's not bothersome at all, right?
No.
And so I think they get excited about that. Plus, I think there's that I think everything goes back to relationships,
Hmm.
and so when you think about your niece and her friends coming over, well, all of my best friends that are lifelong friends are ones that went through crisis with me,
Hmm.
right? Things are forged in fire, and so
Right.
these friends that have helped her and showed up in this time, uh, that's a deepening of a friendship. That's a deepening of a relationship that can last for a long time. Maybe it doesn't last forever,
Uh-huh.
but it is something that actually is going to make it easier for them to share the moments, the struggles, the things they're going through. That shared struggle is going to help them to grow closer bonds. And
Hmm.
all of our kids need relationships that help them grow
Yes.
and be challenged in their faith. So,
Well, and safe people, right? That's one of our
right,
mandates in our youth group is I want to build relationships so when the bad things happen, they have safe, good people to rely on. That's
yep.
just one of the things is in our little mission statement. But you're right. And all the people that showed up for my sister, we'd known everybody since kindergarten. Just that's
Hmm.
who showed up were those people that had been there through all the other stuff. They're the ones that showed up to help. And so that was really cool to see everybody.
Well, it probably took somebody coordinating that too, Melissa, that actually put out the call to all those people. I don't know who that would be, but
I do
they
believe
did
I
a
used
really
the
good job
phrase
of bringing.
I used the phrase calling in the chips.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So you got all of us old people together, and then we sent our children to go do the
that is
Beasties.
true.
But yeah, that's how it worked out for some of us. And then my dad was also there because he loves you guys and he saw you grow up. So
And he did a lot of helpful things. He carried things even though we said don't do that. So but it
yeah.
was yeah, it was heartwarming to see people show up like that. So that was really cool. Um, do if we are planning on youth groups being able to help in situations like this, should there be things that we prepare beforehand? Should there be some training? Should there be maybe some paperwork or some kits we put together? Should we have stuff? What do you think?
Yeah, I think those are really good things to wrestle with. If you are in an area that deals with a lot of natural disasters, like maybe Oklahoma, Texas, those kinds of places that we
The
have,
Florida, the East Coast, the hurricanes.
yeah, like I mean, there's natural disasters everywhere. There may be some value in trying to prepare those things ahead of time. Um, but I actually the best things that we can do is form partnerships with organizations in our community that do those things well,
Hmm.
so that because we may prepare them over and over again, and then there may not be anything for a period of time. So I think there is probably an argument for both. Some
Hmm.
preparation, let's think about this. We want to be prepared, whether it's now or in the future. But also, who are people we can partner with that are going to be responding to natural disasters that are better able or better trained that we can show up with and help. So,
That makes sense. Well, and I like that when you think of resources, right? It doesn't make sense for
mhm.
me to spend money on flood buckets, for example, that UMCOR does, and keep them in my youth building for someday this might happen. That's better
Right.
used somewhere else. But I do think that maybe not a procedure or policy in place. This is our
Hmm.
plan for what we should do. Because I do think you're right about the hands and feet of Jesus. Like there's definitely organizations like the Salvation Army that they have the stuff. They just need the people, and we can be the people. But I do
Yeah.
think if you had a some kind of this is what we are going to do in this situation policy in place, that might be helpful. But okay, so on that same kind of vein, what about skills that we could work on? Do you think that youth need to have certain skills?
As far as responding to natural
Yes.
disasters or in crisis,
Hmm.
hmm, that is really I don't know. I don't know. I think for me, the things that I try to focus on when I'm leading our youth pastor and our youth is being involved in somewhere regularly
Hmm.
so that you have relationships built already. So, are there missional organizations in your community that you have relationships with, that you already know how to respond there. That's interesting. I don't know how to we don't do that here.
Okay.
And so
That-
I'm not
uh-huh. I'm
not quite.
thinking,
I'm trying to think through that.
right. I'm thinking specifically like all of the trees coming down, chainsaws. That's
Yeah.
not something we, play with at youth, but
No.
it is something that the Boy Scouts do. And so
Yeah.
Colin, he's my 15-year-old, and he's gonna love that he's on the podcast. That's something that they have been working on in Boy Scouts. So could it be putting those two organizations together for an afternoon if something happens and now we all need to know how to learn use a chainsaw safely and
Yeah.
properly?
So I think that's a really cool thought process too. And
Hmm.
so here, and this is uh, an interesting thought process too. When you so when there is a disaster like what has just happened in Hera in Choctaw here in Oklahoma, both Samaritan's Purse
Hmm.
and the Baptist Disaster Crew. I can't.
Yes.
I'm not going to get the name right. The
No, yeah, I think
Baptist
that's about
Disaster
it. Yeah.
Response.
Yeah.
Yeah, they both show up and they bring professional chainsawers. Like
Yes, they
that's
do.
what they do.
Uh-huh.
Arborists, maybe I don't know what they're really called, but they also they what they do is they bring volunteers in, train them in specific skills, and then they go out and everything is done through those partnerships.
Hmm.
And so, like for me, that's kind of the way that I want to try to function. I want to find people who are professional. This is what they do,
Oh
and
yeah.
we want to partner up with them to go out and assist at what they do because they do it best.
Hmm.
And like so, somebody like Samaritan's Purse is going to be in this community till everything is cleaned up. Well, they're going out getting work orders, doing all those things. So if I can get them manpower, they already have all the organizational pieces to it. And
Yes.
so all I have to do is show up, they get trained, and then I get to go out and work alongside our youth or our adults or however.
Hmm.
And they're working through Samaritan's Purse to get those things done. Now, in smaller disasters in a smaller area, I think those
Hmm.
are some things about maybe even partnering with your fire departments, and things like that. That like how can we show up with them and work
Hmm.
alongside them to support what they're doing? And sometimes that's pulling tree branches out of the way, not necessarily using the chainsaw, but like
Yeah.
making it easier for the professionals to do what they do.
I think that's what happened last week because the Baptists are out there right now. They have trailers and everything. They're very professional.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
the houses that didn't have major damage, they just had yard damage. The baseball team from Choctaw showed up, and so
Hmm.
the chainsaw guys were going, and then the baseball team was just falling, and they were just taking stuff
Right.
to the street. So, but if you think about it, if the Baptist chainsaw trained people had to stop and drag all that, they wouldn't get as much done.
That's exactly right. And
Hmm.
so, like, sometimes what we're doing is we're trying to make it easier for those who are the best at it to do what they do every time there's one of these things. And so we can show up and make the jobs easier. We can support those that have the right equipment and all those different things. Sometimes we're the ones with the chainsaw, but frequently we're the ones that are actually hauling the branches out of the way, taking them to the curb so the city can come by and pick them up, and
Hmm.
all those different things. And those are really valuable ways to serve and to make things really much easier for the professionals who do that for a living.
Yes, I like that a lot. One of the things that when we were in Shawnee, where you are, and they had the tornado go through, the city spent so much
Hmm.
time getting trees out of the streets so people could go to work that they had not
Right.
done the regular landscaping of downtown. And so that's what we went and did was we pulled the weeds and got the trash and all that kind of stuff out of
Yeah.
downtown just to give the citizens their pretty back, to their confidence,
Yeah.
their joy in their hometown. And so we really that was very heartwarming for us. But it was nice to see that we could be participating in a way that made people feel better. Like, was that absolutely necessary? No, but it
Yeah.
still created good feelings within the community while they're going through this tragedy, through this disaster. That look, this looks nice. So, Plus,
Yeah, I think
something
bringing
to do.
senses of normalcy is really good. Like
That is true.
helping to help. Yeah, and one of the hardest things with like tornadoes and floods and stuff like that is it distributes trash everywhere,
Yes.
right? And well, I can't say most of us. Ian wants to hold a chainsaw and cut trees and do really manly things. But one of the biggest needs of communities after a tornado or natural disaster is actually the really small tuning stuff of picking up all the trash, getting
Yeah.
like insulation gets thrown everywhere.
Hmm.
Like getting those kind of. There was a repair shop that got a hit over here, and there were spark plugs for a mile,
Oh,
like
wow.
just old engine parts and things that were just strewn about. Well, those are things that kids could get hurt on. Not a spark
Hmm.
plug necessarily, but other pieces of metal and things like that got thrown across a park. And so cleaning those things up so kids have like think about the trauma that kids are going through there,
Yes.
having a safe place to go back to the park and be able to play. Those are things that help make it feel normal again for those
Hmm.
kids. And I think as a youth, maybe that seems menial, but it actually has a big payoff at the end of it. It's really important work that needs to be done.
Hmm. Yeah. When
And I think that you talked about one of the other things that's unique to
uh-huh.
youth groups. I think is manpower. We tend to have a lot of kids who want to go do something, and
Hmm.
so when you bring 10, 15, 20, 30 people with you and you go do something, well, it gets done really quick.
Yeah. Yeah. I was
So
saying about insulation, May 3rd tornado in 99, insulation just rained
mhm.
down forever just in our yard. So it's just everywhere. Uh, Vinny, he's the 7-year-old that he was in the house when the tornado hit. He slept through the whole thing. But I drove him back into the neighborhood for the first time about a week later, a little less than that. And he goes, Missy, are we still in Oklahoma? And I was like, yes,
Yeah,
Dad, this is your neighborhood. And he goes, oh, it just looks so different with all the trees gone because the trees are just everywhere. But that
yeah.
normal, like he's living in a hotel right now. He's still going to school every day, but like it's his normal is so skewed right now that he didn't even know he was still in the state of Oklahoma. Like, yeah, he says just looks so different.
Well, there's one of my neighbors. He lost a really big tree in that storm, and he chainsawed it all up. It's all cleared away, so it kind of looks normal. But when I drive by there, the sun shines differently now, and so you can
Oh,
tell something has changed,
uh-huh.
even though you can't see what's changed. And so, yeah, I'm sure that looked really or felt really different for him too. So,
Yeah, like that
I
was
mean,
really
I'm
interesting.
46 years old. He's 7. So like that's a big difference. And try to ponder all that out.
Yeah, yeah. He's no, he's just back at home, like with his tablet, going, okay, this is the thing. So he's just all the
Yeah.
pondering. Um, okay. So we kind of talked about a lot of specific ways. I've got a list, and I'll see what you think of my list here. Some specific ways church youth groups can get involved during and after a natural disaster, like organizing supplies.
Hmm.
Think that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Offering emotional support.
Absolutely. It's one of
Hmm.
the things they're actually best at, especially for their peers. And so, if they have peers that go through something like this, nobody's going to show up better for another high school or middle school student than another high school or middle school student,
Yeah.
right? They're going to sit, they're going to listen. As adults, we feel a need to fix something,
Hmm.
whereas kids are, I think they're better at just sitting with people in their muck, and that's important.
That is, yeah, absolutely. Okay, what else is on my list here? Volunteering with relief organizations. Absolutely, that's what we've been talking about, right? Finding those relationships and figuring out how they can serve. But what do you think is the biggest challenge a youth group might face when serving in a crisis situation?
Patience.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, so it's the single biggest challenge I face. So when the tornado hit Shawnee, which is the community in which I serve as a pastor, um, I immediately started getting phone calls from people who attend our church to know how they could go help,
Hmm.
and I immediately wanted to coordinate help. That was like one of the things I wanted to do right away. I wanted to make sure that as a local church, we're showing up for our community and loving them. and then very quickly realized that the people were wanting to go help, but they're wanting to go help in areas where power lines are down, gas lines are broken, houses are on fire, like
Hmm.
nails and everything everywhere, gas leaks from cars that got tipped over. Like, what you have to be patient enough to let the first responders do what the first responders do,
Hmm.
and then and this was the thing I wish I had done previously, was actually had developed a better relationship with the emergency management people in my community, so that when they were ready for us, we knew exactly where to send people.
Ooh, that makes
And
sense.
so
Like what was cleared
so
already?
like it yeah, like,
Hmm.
so where is it safe for me to send volunteers now? Like, because what we don't want to do is to create bigger issues by sending volunteers in somewhere where they also get injured, and now we're taxing further emergency management that's already taxed.
Hmm.
And so the biggest thing we can do is to be patient and to begin thinking through what is it that people are really going to need, and then also trying to have those relationships built ahead of time, so that when they are ready for us to move in, or there is a professional organization like the Baptist Disaster Relief and Samaritan's Purse or Salvation
Hmm.
Army that's going in, and they
Convoy
have
of
the
Hope.
clearance to go in. Yeah, how do we partner with them and jump in and go do the work that
Hmm.
way? So,
Yeah.
um, and because there's really to do it, but I think one of the best things that we can do early on is to gather names of people who want to be involved,
Hmm.
and to help prepare a team so that when they are ready for us, we can go and respond. I think another thing to be really careful of is, like, the supplies that are most needed in a crisis are cleanup supplies, uh, water, and non-perishable foods.
Yes.
And people, the first thing what they want to bring is what? Do you know? Their
Yeah, because
dirty
I brought
laundry.
water. They brought what?
The, they want to bring their dirty laundry. They want to bring clothes. Well,
Oh, yes.
most people are
Yeah.
not asking for clothes in the immediate aftermath. They have the
Hmm.
clothes they're on. They're able to salvage some clothes. They already went to Walmart and bought some things, right? Like, so clothes are not the immediate need. The immediate need is water and cleanup supplies, tarps, things like that. And so, and one of the biggest things that people ask for is totes, like plastic totes
Hmm.
to put their belongings in. And so those are the kinds of to put their belongings in. In the meantime, if you could do it while you're trying to be patient and serving, you could
Hmm.
be gathering those to put their belongings in. If not, having some of those things and beginning to drive to get those things is going to be helpful. And when you do go out, to meet the needs of the people you're going to interact with.
Absolutely. That was the strangest thing because people were trying to bring clothes. We had clothes. The clothes had to be
Yeah.
washed because they were in a tornado. But like we didn't need clothes, and that was over and over. That's why I heard people saying, "Oh, can we bring you this?" Well, we don't need that.
Yeah.
Um, we did. There were a couple of groups that brought.
Diapers and formula.
Yes.
Diapers and formula are the other big deal. So,
That one is very good. And if you don't do canned goods that don't have a pop top, because I had to go buy a can
yeah.
opener because that was in the tornado. Um,
Yeah.
there was something else along those lines that would be helpful. Laundry detergent. But that people brought the cleaning supplies in the tote because we did need
Mm-hmm.
all of the totes. I mean, we bought I don't know how many boxes from U-Haul, so we could get her house packed up. But the cleaning supplies that came in totes, those were the best. Um, okay, so if you were gathering those supplies, what could be a thing that you would also want to gather if you were trying to look out for the safety of your youth? But since you've already been talking about working with other organizations, is that something that you think that they would more or less take care of? Here's what I'm thinking about. So you had already talked about the down power lines, so we don't really need to warn kids not to touch power lines because we're going to wait until all that is taken care of before
Yeah.
we go in. Um, but like we're probably not going to take our kids into a situation where they need hard hats. That's that's not that's just we should avoid that. And so I'm trying to think of any other safety things that we might need to prepare our students for, or the biggest ones I can think is gloves. That was the thing that we needed.
Yeah. Yeah, and honestly, most of the time, good leather gloves are going to be
Hmm.
best. But you could use those cloth ones that have the rubber, the blue rubber or whatever on them.
Hmm.
Those are really good. And then safety glasses, because even if they're not doing the chainsawing, even if
Hmm.
they're whatever, when you're pulling limbs, sometimes the limbs flop and hit your so. Safety glasses and gloves are probably the biggest thing. Also, ear protection
Hmm.
could be another thing. So, if they're around a lot of chainsaws, that is really loud noise. And
That's
then
apparently what's happening
really,
today, just so you know. The chainsaws are happening
yeah,
in Choctaw.
yeah, and then tons and tons of water, because one of the
Hmm.
things that happens is if it's after a hurricane or a flood or a tornado, usually it's very humid right
Hmm.
afterwards, so you're losing a lot of moisture and working out there, sweating a lot, and so making sure your kids are staying hydrated and that they have proper snacks and things like that. It seems silly, but it really is important, because you're more likely to get hurt when you're tired and fatigued.
Hmm.
And so what we want to do is protect them and help do that. Also making sure the kids are wearing long sleeve shirts and pants and adequate shoes, not
Yes.
Crocs or any of those kinds of things when they come to serve. So, but the biggest things I think are eyeglasses, ear protection, and gloves, and then like you said, making sure that they have the right hydration and snacks available.
Hmm. I think those are all excellent things. And the glasses and the gloves, that's the things you can gather now and put in a box. Like those are going to be fine in a box. And you can wear the eyeglasses when having Nerf battles. Just going to put that out there, everyone.
Yeah,
Um,
the Nerf battles, that's not something that a missions pastor thinks about, but that's something
oh,
a youth pastor thinks about a
it is.
lot.
That's
So,
the reason I own them. We have a whole thing of them.
but here, but something just occurred to me is you talked about like the training
Uh-huh.
earlier. Well, and if you've got all these supplies, what does it look like for you to find the widows in your church and go do tree stuff for them regularly using
Hmm.
the gloves and all that stuff? You take dads with you, moms with
Yes.
you. They can do the chainsaws. Kids can pull limbs, do all that stuff. And this is a regular something that they're doing for members of your church or people in your community that you're going at, and it's kind of a practice for disaster, but at the
It
same
is.
time, you're actually serving regularly in the community in which you exist.
Well, and I also love that now they're going to have these skills that they can take to a disaster, but also, my kid is in a construction high school, and those are things that he can take on a job site someday, like in the
Mm-hmm.
future, to earn money. So I love when they learn skills like that, and or to take care of their own house, like all those things. Well,
Sure.
thank you so much. Is there any final thoughts that you've got that you're like, oh, I need to tell them, don't do that?
Yeah, I think this the biggest thing is everything hinges on relationships. So, if you're a youth pastor or a missions pastor and you're trying to figure out like how are we prepared for this, getting to know the people in your city that are responsible for these things is super
Hmm.
important. Um, Building relationships with anybody like Salvation Army or somebody else that may be responding during a natural disaster, super important. That way, you know who to talk to when these things do happen. And then I think the other thing is just remember patience. It's just you don't want to create a situation in which you're going to get somebody injured and put more taxing on EMS. But we do want to show up, and we do want to show up in force and be the hands and feet of Christ. And our kids are super equipped to do that. Their joy, their natural outflowing of energy, their desire to serve. If we're not engaging them when there is a natural disaster, it's not good. Like
Right.
they
Yeah.
have the ability to go and love and the desire to do so.
Hmm.
So I appreciate you wanting to talk about this today. It's something that's near and dear to my heart. I love getting to see our kids out in our community, and I think anytime you can create regular rhythms of that is going to be something that's exceptional.
I love that. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on today. Be sure to check out our website and check out other podcast episodes with all of my friends. And we'll see y'all next time. Thanks. Bye.
Bye bye.